in all your academic research and studies, have you come across anything that's like shocking, or have you come? What is the thing that comes to mind where you're like, man, it would be. I really want this to be known. Like everybody should know about this.
I don't know about shocking, but I think one of the main things, one of the most important things in the study of religions is the first thing that we learn basically, and that anyone learns when we study the topic is that religions are internally diverse and that they always change over time. I think that is like the fundamental perspective that one needs to keep in mind is that there isn't a Islam or a Christianity. Um, there are always going to be, sometimes people say there are as many versions of Christianity as there are Christians in the world. That's maybe overdoing it a bit,
Yeah,
but
I get it though.
yeah, because everyone, like I mentioned before, a religion is made up of people who create that religion, who perform that religion. Without the people, the religion doesn't exist, right? So people are what makes a religion what it is, and people change, and people will bring um, their own perspectives, their own backgrounds, and that will shape the religion. And when a religion encounters a new culture, even though maybe like the core, speaking about Islam, it still remains monotheistic and it still usually has those classic five pillars, etc. But a lot of the religion will always be changed when it meets new cultures, when it evolves over time. Basically, I think that it isn't shocking, but it's such a fundamental for me. It was a new way of looking at things when I realized that that was true because you have these essentializing views about religion. Well, I know what Christianity is; it believes in that. I know what Hinduism is. Usually, it's so much more complicated than that.
I love
Uh,
new ways of looking at things. I love when there's an opportunity for the brain to sort of light up like a light bright and
yeah,
think of things differently.
there are always going to be things that when I study all these traditions, you find, and it's a bit of it's not embarrassing, but it's one of the things that I do a lot when I study these things, that I find similarities, right? Um,
Ah, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good thing too.
Well, I was gonna ask you about that because like, uh, what are some of the biggest differences and similarities that you found that might give us a better understanding of how we can kind of like bridge gaps in a world that seems unstable right now?
mm,
Like, is there anything in here that we can learn that you think that could, bring some uniting peace to the world?
Would have a unifying effect,
Yeah,
informational wise.
it's a
it's a
it's a
tough one.
it's a tough one.
We just put it on you to save the world, essentially.
I'll do my best. No, I mean, starting off, it's very important to realize also that religions are very different, and that we bring our own preconceptions and perspectives with us when we understand different religions. A classic example I like to bring up is when we compare Christianity and Islam, for example. We have this model of religion that's usually based on a Christian model, that we have the Holy Scripture, which is the Bible, and we have like the founder, you could call Jesus, I guess, the founder. And you have like a dogma or like a creed. If we compare this to Islam, we might think, well, oh, so Muhammad is the Jesus of Islam, and the Quran is the Bible of Islam. And on the surface, that might seem to be a legitimate comparison, but when we actually start diving deeper, it's not really that comparable because really, if you want to do a comparison, the role of Jesus in Christianity is more similar to the role of the Quran in Islam. It's the word of God that is sort of at the center of the whole thing. Uh, like Muhammad might be comparable to like the Virgin Mary, for example. Um, we shouldn't perhaps make those kinds of comparisons, but just to show that often we project our understanding on things and we see similarities when actually they can be culturally unique and very different from each other.
Yeah.
On the other hand, certainly you can also find many similarities. I guess one of the classic examples is the so-called golden rule, right? Almost every religion
Yeah.
and philosophical tradition is concerned with there's usually sort of an ethics that appears similar in many of these traditions, right? Treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. Feeding the poor, right? These kinds of things is very, especially in the Abrahamic religions, that is a sort of very
well, I think it was Confucius that I feel like I heard a quote from him that sounded very similar to the golden rule that Christ said. And Confucius was way before Jesus, wasn't he?
Yeah. So I think like 400 BCE, I think is the...
Yeah. It's a powerful quote because, like, imagine that probably could heal the world if we actually could embody some of that.
Yes, I agree. And it seems simple, and it is, I guess, if you really boil it down. But it appears that it isn't perhaps as simple as one might think, looking at the way the world works. But I did actually a lecture. This was 2 years ago, when I was asked to do a lecture about the meaning of life according to the Abrahamic religions, which was a difficult task, obviously. But in the course of preparing that lecture, I actually found a kind of a thread that ran through them all in a certain sense, which was this concern with, and I divided it up according to 3 layers, which was based on a model in the course that I was lecturing for. But so it was the personal meaning, social meaning, and sort of transcendent divine meaning. In that the personal meaning is for us to, in very crude terms, submit to the will of God. But what does that actually mean? That means to submit to something higher than ourselves, higher than our own egos, basically. To not gratify ourselves and our egos, but to see some things from a larger perspective. And then you have the social part of that, which is, well, what does that mean practically? Well, that means looking away from yourself and toward others in your community, and loving your neighbor as Jesus says, for example, which is also another thing that we find very common thing. Loving your neighbor in different forms is also something that comes up. Giving to the poor and the needy, taking care of those around you, loving your family, your friends, etc. Wanting for a better society, in a sense. But why do we do that? What's the meaning behind that? Well, on a divine level, and this is where it gets a bit mystical, in that we have in the Kabbalah, for example, the idea of the Sefirot, which is a kind of mirroring of this world in a sense, and that the things we do down here affect the divine world. Similarly, in Sufism, you have in the school of Ibn Arabi, the world is the manifestation of the divine attributes. And so the world is sort of not perfecting because God is perfect, but you are sort of accomplishing God's divine being by performing the divine, the imitatio Dei. This is Latin for imitating the divine, right? You are, by not being selfish, by helping others, you are imitating the divine mercy, and thereby you are completing the whole purpose of creation.
Manifesting it, really.
Yeah.
Manifesting and making it actual.
Exactly. That's a very beautiful way to put it. And so, at least in this case, in this lecture, this was something that I found, in some ways at least, very recurring in both Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And I think that can be said for a lot of other traditions too, is that religions have this tendency of grounding yourself in something greater, right? In something that is divine. It doesn't have to be a god, right? Buddhism can have gods, but it doesn't have God as a fundamental aspect of its teachings. It doesn't need God, let's say, but it still has a grounding in something that is real, something that is true, and to act and to manifest that truth in the world, which often takes very similar forms in terms of turning away from the ego. The ego is often seen as destructive, and instead working for the betterment of your neighbor. That's one of the most fundamental similarities that I find in many religions.
It's weird. For some reason, in the midst of this, I don't know how relevant it really is, but the thought came to my mind that it's a good saying that do unto others as you would have done to you, and like the golden rule is like a nice thing that I feel like many people would be like, yeah, that's good. Let's treat each other the way we want to be treated. But the unspoken part of it is like intelligent people add a little part secretly that's like, well, do as I say, not as I do. Like, this is I want everybody to treat each other, but that's not really how reality works. And for the greater good, I might lie to you. And for the greater good, I might do this. There's like a paradox there that's not spoken of, which is, well, there's a good reason why everybody doesn't just treat each other the way they wish they would be treated. Like there is a reason why that doesn't happen that goes unspoken about. I just wanted to throw that into the mix, that wrench into the flow of thinking here. See what everybody thought.
If I'm understanding you correctly, you mean that like it's more complicated than what.
Right, because if you tell a human that, like we disseminate this wisdom to the people, treat others, let's follow the golden rule. There's going to be a percentage that are just going to be like, yeah, I believe that, and not do it. There's going to be a percentage that, like, there's a reason why it wouldn't work. There's a reason why it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And what are those reasons? What is the reason behind that not, being like a neat and tidy solve to the problem?
Yeah. Hyper complex. It's like the rule's more of like an aim shot, and then what we see is the evolutionary steps to get there, I guess, right? We're like kind of growing, we're trying to get there, but we're so far behind, and it's so nuanced, so complex, so regional, so everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to, this is simplifying it, but I think a lot of these troubles come down to the ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just this understanding that we have of ourselves and wanting to gratify ourselves, and the ego is such a difficult thing to not listen to, right? Because it's sort of all consuming. This is why the mystics do all these incredibly difficult practices, like ascetic, like they live in a cave in the mountains, because everything in this world will just feed the ego, right? So this is the sort of perennial struggle that we as humans have, is that we have this self, this ego that our whole universe revolves around. And as long as
it's almost like we need more not like egoless examples to draw from or something. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
No, I agree. I mean, that's why many of these figures in history can be so inspiring, right? Because we see, even though I would argue no one's completely escaped from their ego, because that's impossible. We need the ego to, look before we cross the street, so we don't get, killed by.
Who's talking otherwise?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it's a difficult thing. It's so fundamental to the way we understand ourselves. But I don't think, and this is also important in that a lot of the mystical traditions, we talk about annihilating the ego. Usually, after annihilation comes returning to the world. So the end goal is not annihilation. The annihilation of the self is a way for you to get perspective on yourself. It's like, oh, this thing that I thought was the whole universe was actually an illusion. And now I have to come back with that knowledge and figure out, or by that point, I hope they would already know how to understand the world from that new perspective, which would in that case perhaps be more be more compassionate.
A question that comes to mind is like, how would a room full of egoless people organize themselves? Like if they had a task, like, if we made like a simulation, like, all right, we've got a bunch of people, they're different people, like they're different heights, they're different genders, they're whatever. They're in a room and they've got to plug the holes in a sinking ship. How do they organize themselves? And have like an example of how egoless people would operate in a group, you know what I mean? As opposed to like a group of typical ego people where, you know, one person rise to power very quickly through dominance and social stuff. What would the difference be? And then, you know, like, how would a group of Jesuses organize themselves? How would a group of Buddha, you know what I mean? They'd probably just teleport out of there. But to me, I feel like we could use more examples of people that have at least understand what the ego is and have transcended it to some degree. Examples out there of seeing that, because it's just so easy. Like you said, the ego speaks up for itself so quickly. It's so reactive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Rather than having the patience to be like, you know what, that's okay. I'll let myself lose in this situation because I see what's going on here. What typically happens? You know, as a person with an ego typically just go meditate in a cave. What do they do? You know, among other egos.